But then is it, as some people have suggested, our fault? It washes back to us for, propping up the Saudi regime.
Well, I mean, that is entering the foreign policy debates, and I think in that sense it is not our fault in terms of propping up the Saudi regime per se, because that is a question in foreign policy that we would have to discuss at some length about what it is that we can actually do.
Have we brought it upon ourselves, I think.
What is our fault is in not being restrictive enough in terms of, as I say, those specific agenda-driven people who are doing that work on what is an international scale, i.e. Saudi-driven. If you go to the Saudi embassy and you pick up materials there that are distributing this kind of separatist ideology, then that is something that we need to be on top of and need to stop.
Let me just, we did, ultimately it was decided not to invite Anjem Choudary and his colleagues. It brings a chuckle to Dayman Leslie, but of course, I mean, we'll discuss how serious these people are and how dangerous they are in a minute. They are very conspicuous. That's a point. These are the people who make a big show of burning poppies and threaten to burn effigies of the royal family. Muslim Against Crusades is the current incarnation. But it was decided not to have Anjem on the programme, I know his colleagues, but he sent an email, a message of support, one might say. Salma Yaqub has negated her Islam by wanting to legislate in Parliament, whereas Muslims must believe Allah is the only legislator. Taj Hage is not a Muslim because he's rejected things known by necessity in Islam, like the hijab and women not leading men in prayer. Well, you agree with that, sir, do you? Yes, you do. Okay, we'll come to you in a minute. He rejects the Sunnah, the actions of the Prophet. Majid Nawaz is not a Muslim because he's negated his Islam by allying with non-Islamic regimes such as the British to silence Muslim voices, and also by denying there was anything called Sharia to be implemented within society. Now, all right, you chuckled, Dayman, but Majid Nawaz, how much attention should we give
Can I say
these people?
I want to congratulate your show for not having him on. I think there's a
because we've got a Muslim on the panel, according to him.
So that's right. So
we have one Muslim because we have Salma.
Dayman's
no,
Dayman's about the nearest we get to it, I think.
Can I just you asked me a question, allow me to. So, congratulate you for not having him on. He's too many times, the media is fascinated. They have this fetish interest with Anjem Choudary. Anjem Choudary represents about 0.0001% of, if that, and a couple of thugs on either side of him. Now, the problem is actually bigger than that. It's good you haven't had him on. However, there is a problem with extremism among certain Muslims in this country.
Does the stuff that he says resonate with a significant amount of young people?
We mustn't bury our heads in the sand. So, as well as recognizing that Muslims must be able to dress how they choose, and the problem isn't with dress and all those things that I've said earlier, I also acknowledge, and it's the work I do, that there is a problem with extremism, and we have to be vocal and challenge that extremism. And I think the best thing to do is when other Muslims stand up and challenge that level of extremism.
Can I get some examples?
So, just finally, before I defer to Salma, because I never thought I'd actually find myself in a position to say I agree with Salma. Actually, I've been agreeing with much of what she said on this show today. So before I do respectfully defer to her, I would just like to say that the gentleman that clapped that statement in the audience, that's an example of the type of extremism.
Well, should we talk to him?
Yeah, we must challenge that, because how can he sit there and clap when Taj is insulted as not being a Muslim? It's just, I just find it really shocking that he thinks that he can agree with Anjem.
Which bit did you clap? I just reminded me. It was a bit about Taj Hage.
If you had actually listened when I actually clapped, I actually clapped when it was pointing to that gentleman, not to you.
Let me finish.
If I just say, and let me finish, right? I actually agree with everything that you said, and also with the other, like, I think panelists there. But a lot of the stuff that this doctor has said is actually not part of Islam, and is actually against Islam. And I actually clapped when because since he's been talking, I've had my hand up, because a lot of the things that he said make me look bad. I've got a beard, I dress a particular way. Okay, I'm not a problem to society. I get on with everybody. I'll work with the community and all that kind of thing.
The bit you actually clapped at, were you agreeing with the general point or this specific point? By rejecting, Target is not a Muslim because by rejecting things known by necessity in Islam, like the hijab.
Yes, it's actually mentioned. It's actually mentioned in the Quran in Surah An-Nur, chapter 30 and 31. It's an actual. It's not just something that's been actually in the community or has been said. It's actually part of the religion that the woman must wear. The woman must wear hijab. Okay, this is not something which is being taught to us by our culture.
Women must wear hijab.
That's right. Unless you're saying that the Quran is wrong, unless you're saying that the Quran is wrong, then you're right.
Please let Target respond.
Right. I mean, the word hijab appears in the Quran 8 times. Not once in this 8 times that it talks about a hair covering.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't.
Chapter 30
it doesn't. It does not. I know. I've studied it. It doesn't.
You haven't studied it properly then.
And the Quran is quite specific. The Quran is quite specific that if God had wanted something like that, He would have made it clear. Nowhere in the Quran that it says cover woman's hair.
Yes, it
does. All it talks about.
All right, listen, we're not getting anywhere. We're getting into an argument about what and what isn't. Miriam Francois Sarrat, and then Chris, I'll bring you in because Chris has written a massive tome, very interesting too, on Islamophobia. So we're going to hear from Chris in a second. Miriam.
Yeah, no, I think, there are intra-Muslim debates, and I think it's very important for us to have those debates, but I don't think this is the place to have them. We're certainly not going to settle them today. I want to come back to the point that Majid was making about extremism. I think one of the issues, obviously, is to do with how we define this question of extremism. And I think there is a differential treatment of Muslims when it comes to the issue of extremism. Europol stats for 2010, the European Policing Agency, tell us that actually Islamic types of violence are less than 1%. 99.6% of terrorism in Europe is perpetrated by non-Muslim terrorists. And yet, if we look at the way that this is presented in the press, we see there's an overrepresentation of Muslim terrorism in the press. And we also see that there's a differential treatment of Muslims when it comes to terrorism. You don't often see white supremacists be under control orders. You don't see them being taken abroad for
terrorism
torture.
Is a very big story, and there's a very long list of.
Right, but let's give
Richard
it proportional
Reed, for example,
representation.
The shoe bomber, the 7/7, and after 7/7, the failed attempt as well. After that,
99.6% of the terrorism
the liquid bomber.
in Europe
it just goes on, doesn't it?
I'm not saying they don't exist. Not saying it doesn't exist. Not saying it should. It's not newsworthy.
You can't say it doesn't exist.
It's absolutely newsworthy, and it absolutely should be reported. But it should be reported proportionally to its importance with regards to other forms of terrorism. You don't hear about the 99.6%, which is non-Islam.
I like Maram very much, but she's misreading the stats from the Europol. Besides, anyway, Europol stats are extremely iffy. But leaving that aside, leaving that aside, what is really tragic, and it shows here, it's not the war against Islam, by the way. It's the war within Islam. People denouncing each other as heretics, as not being this, not being that. I mean, that is the real crisis, actually, for Islam.
It's true.
There is a debate. That's the reality.
Yeah.
Actually, it's good to have a debate.
I know,
you can't say so much of the time here. What are Muslims doing? Why aren't Muslims challenging the extremists? And actually, what this shows is this is happening constantly. Anjem Choudary was actually hounded out of Birmingham, not by the police. Actually, by 250 Muslim organisations said, "You are not welcome here." Because
but it took a long time.
Somebody mentioned, and it's a very interesting analogy, I think it was you, Miriam, an American right-wing preacher type who might have links to far-right groups there. Now, Chris Allen, people accuse, people identify double standards here, because they say, they're told it's Islamophobic to say, his views are repulsive to me if they're a Muslim, because you should understand the creed and the credo and the religion. But if an American preacher came out with all the same stuff about women and about homosexuals and about supremacists, would you not be the first to have a phobia about them?
No. I think there's a big difference between Islam, in terms of being Islamophobic. It's absolutely fine to say I disagree with the religion of Islam. It's absolutely fine to say I disagree with Judaism, with Christianity, I disagree with atheism. It's perfectly fine on that level. It's Islamophobic when you hate Muslims because you hate the religion.
Right.
And then you put that in the capital. Very, very clear point to be made. Right. And I do have to say, I think that, it had some of the things that have been said up there, been said by Nick Griffin or by the EDL, there would have been a much wider outcry.
Have you heard Islamophobia in this school this morning?
I would suggest that the suggestion that the burqa is a bin bag, I would suggest that that's a very...
you try wearing it. You know, you try wearing it.
Why would I? I'm not going to try wearing a miniskirt.
No, because you're a man.
It's a ridiculous
I can
concept.
insult something that I'm forced to wear.
You're not forced to wear it. You're wearing a red cardigan.
I'm talking about Saudi
but I thought we were talking about a problem in Britain.
Well, wait a minute, let's explore it.
I'm just saying.
Let's explore it, Dayman. I know we'll come to Yusuf stuff that are coming in a second. Why is it Islamophobic if somebody thinks that is ridiculous?
Well, I don't think it's Islamophobic to say it's ridiculous because they think it's ridiculous. I think it's Islamophobic because you're feeding into an ideology that exists out there, the negativity. So this idea that all Muslim women are oppressed. So even the person at the side of me, because she's covered her hair, but that's the view that's out there. And there's a lack of differentiation between in the general public in this country between what's an extremist and what's not. And I'll give an example. And we've already spoken about burning the poppy by Muslims Against Crusades. Well, Taj, I believe, burnt a burqa. Yeah. Now, surely that's an extremist behaviour.
No,
so you must be an extremist. Why? How does the general public differentiate
the reason for burning the burqa was
you?
quite simple. I wanted to give Muslims who burn the books or burn poppies a taste of their own medicine.
But you're talking about
they will never do such a thing in the future.
We don't have a culture where we go and burn things in the street.
That this is distasteful.
So it's an extremist behaviour. It's an extremist behaviour.
Yusuf, you've been trying to come in. What do you want to say?
I think we are seriously confusing the issues here. I think there is a serious problem in the West in terms of after the Second World War, religion was left to the private and not to the public. And the West is struggling to deal with people who identify themselves with religion. They really don't understand the depth of feelings, the depth of family structures, which are so sort of love this particular way of life. And there is a kind of, in some quarters, what I call secular extremism, which wants to tell Muslims, forget about religion, forget about your faith, everything everybody else does is right.
Well, some Christians feel the same way.
The same way. And I think, in a way, Islam has been very positive in terms of Western culture, in bringing back spirituality to life, bringing out family values, bringing out issues which matter to people. And this is why Islam essentially is 1/5 of humanity. And to trivialize and stereotype and try to have a magic change to this religion, I think is quite counterproductive.
What do you mean by a magic change?
Well, somehow everybody is going to believe that many of the ways that people like to live can be marginalized with particular, imposing a particular way of life. I think where that statement becomes Islamophobic, when we make sweeping generalization that everybody in Iran and everybody in Afghanistan or Saudi wears that particular dress.
Well, let's talk about here.
They're a woman. They have to.
Let's talk about here. Let's talk about Britain. That's what from the audience, gentlemen from the audience, in just 1 second. But we're talking about this country.
Yeah.
The same applies. There's a minority of women who likes to wear a particular code of dress. By no means this is Islamophobic. This is Islamic. And to actually pick on all the negatives. You see, this debate within Islam about reformation, about reinterpretation of faith is a very genuine and valid one.
Okay.
But the problem is when we pick on all the negatives and we make it as Islam, and the whole tone we speak about Islam is negative.
You sir, what do you want to say? Sorry, this gentleman here. Sorry, I promise.
What I'd like to say,
move on in a minute.
regarding the dress, what was referred to as a bin liner. I think there's another perspective that's neither religious nor political, and that's a human element. The idea of our faces, all of us in here, when the camera's on us, we can express ourselves. You're able to see what I think and what I believe through my face and the expression of my face. It's my belief that if the eyes are just exposed, then it becomes very difficult to see. All of us have been given a face whereby it's not necessarily a sexual thing, it's whereby we can actually communicate with now, if we're talking about integration, there's a difference between assimilation and integration.
Let me just correct.
Assimilation means where you actually change who you are. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about integration, where you become a part of the society.
I fully agree with that. And neither was I supporting burqa, and I'm actually against
the freedom to wear the burqa.
They try to impose a way of life on people.